Welcome to the AvGeeksAssemble Podcast. Hello there, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of season 2 of the AvGeeksAssemble podcast. I'm your host, Rob, and with me tonight from the AvGeeksAssemble stable is Anthony Fogarty as my faithful co-host. Ant, how are you doing?
Not too bad, mate. Yourself?
I'm not bad, mate. Not bad at all. And joining us this evening is Mike. Mike, how are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you.
And joining us for the first time on the podcast is the one and only Mark Glenham. Mark, how are you?
Yeah, good, buddy. You?
Yeah, not bad, not bad.
Good, man.
So I thought I'd start this episode with a few bits of housekeeping. Firstly, we wanted to thank everyone who has sent in any comments or any thoughts about the podcast or the live streams we've been doing. We do appreciate every single one of them, and we use it to make everything better. And I'd also like to thank everyone who is getting involved in the Facebook. It's something that we are sort of trying to push and sort of spread the community far and wide. So thank you for everyone who has been involved and continues to be involved. And we hope to keep good things on in the future. So I thought I would start with you, Mark, as it's your first time on the podcast.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into photography and how you got into planes.
Okay. I got into photography quite late in 2012. So I'm 59 now. So it's 2012 that I got into photography. I did a 3-month Open University online course, which I found excellent, and kind of got the bug after that to learn more about photography. So kind of went on to doing a little bit of all sorts of genres, but met a chap who became my mentor, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, who started running sort of studio workshops in Milton Keynes. Whilst I wasn't interested in studio photography, it gave me a learning platform for sort of various genres. So we did weddings, studio flash, off-camera flash, all sorts, art nude, wedding photography, high fashion. So we did all sorts, and I kind of got a real bug for just general photography from there. Shot a bit of wildlife, but at the time the wildlife was mainly zoo stuff. So it's just out and about with the camera. And it just kept progressing and progressing. I eventually joined the Guild of Photographers, where I started entering their monthly competitions and did very well at that. And it just kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me. But at the start, I was shooting all sorts of subjects, anything and everything. All the silly things that we probably do on 365 projects, where you'll shoot literally anything, droplets on a bit of grass and poppies in a field, and sort of stuff like that. But in time, it started narrowing down into kind of aviation, wildlife, and a bit of studio work. It was kind of birds and birds, sort of metal feather and skin. And it stayed like that for a little while, to be fair. The planes and the aviation started getting more and more of an interest, going to RIAT every year. 2014, I started going out to air bases on my own. Generally, I don't mix very well with people. I'm a bit of a loner. But my first visit, it was 2014 to Coningsby. And I was wondering what all the excitement was at the time when I went there, but they had some Indian flankers in. Which was quite a nice time, quite a nice starting point. So that started that. The wildlife progressed away from zoos into kind of more the natural wildlife. What kicked off the natural wildlife to me was I generally go everywhere with my wife Amanda, and we was at RSPB Bempton Cliffs for the gannets. But whilst looking for the gannets, I saw my first barn owl in the wild. And that sort of kicked in the actual wildlife. I'd done owl days and things like that where everything's set up for you, but seeing an actual barn owl, the shots I got weren't great, but it meant more to me than the perfect shots I was getting on owl days. So that really kicked off the kind of the wildlife side. The birds of the skin variety kind of faded out, mainly because they were scantily clad, and I don't think Amanda really loved it that much. So they kind of phased out, and most of my studio photography work was then basically on my son George, because he's in performing arts, so he needed headshots and stuff like that. So, and that's, as he's got older, has got less and less, if I'm being honest. So now it's kind of aviation and wildlife are my passions. And modern military aviation is my main passion. I'm not overly a Spitfire and a Hurricane, they're great, and Lancaster's great, but it doesn't really. I wouldn't travel to see them. It does. I know it excites a lot of people. It may sound a bit bad because they're very got a lot of heritage to the UK, but just give me a dirty grey jet making a lot of noise, and it's that's kind of what I like shooting. Um, and I'm heavily into the editing side as well. I use Lightroom a lot. I use Photoshop a lot. I love that side of things. Constantly learning. I'm sort of self-taught on that, but I'm probably known a lot for over editing, which I'm cool with. I don't care. They're my images. But the wildlife is a great release from the aviation as well. I can do that with my other half. We go out to a lot of reserves. We do a lot of chasing birds. We've got like bird apps where there's rare birds, and we go out and try and find them. So we can do it together, and it's kind of similar to the aviation. You're tracking fast subjects that are moving, and that kind of thing. But it's that I think looking around, a lot of photographers seem to mix wildlife in with aviation, because they're similar subjects as well, and they balance well with the photography. But I tend to do the photography when me and Amanda go out, and she has the spotting scope, so she can see a crazy amount further than my lens will ever go, with a crazy amount of detail. So we get the best of both worlds, and we've travelled all over the UK. We've gone into Wales, gone into Scotland, doing wildlife. So it keeps you active, really does keep you active. So yeah, so that's what I do.
Wonderful, thanks very much. A nice little rundown. And I mean, looking at some of your pictures, you do seem to get everywhere and get lots of different subjects, which is always enjoyable.
Yeah, and that's it. And we do a bit of landscape as well, because again, you can mix everything. Outdoors is outdoors. There's plains, there's wildlife, there's landscapes, there's seascapes. Seascapes are quite nice as well, but they kind of fall off a bit of the landscape genre as well. So yeah, there's so much to see out there, and we just like keeping busy, seeing new places. Amanda does a lot of walking, so we kind of do the stuff together. She does something called geocaching. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. But it means we travel to some great locations. To get everywhere we go, there's geocaches, and generally they're all in really good locations. So graveyards and things like that, which are great for green woodpeckers. So I didn't know that, but apparently it's quite common. So we've seen some great stuff in churchyards, but it just gets you out and about, and you get to see some great stuff. And just take your camera with you, because you just never know what you're going to see.
No, exactly that, and that leads us quite well into the subject of this podcast. Obviously, we are mainly a bunch of aviation photographers, but we are, at the end of the day, photographers, and a lot of us do lots of different things throughout the course of the year, and when the air show season's closed. I mean, as I'm sure you're aware, the air show season runs mainly from about May till October, and outside of night shoots and base visits, there's not really a lot else to do, unless you want to go stand outside Stansted and take a picture of an EasyJet plane taking off. But I don't think anyone really wants to do that, do they? So this whole conversation today is going to be about the different types of photography we get up to, sort of when we do it, and just sort of talk about the other aspects of photography that we all enjoy, and the passion behind it, and that sort of thing. Before we go into that, I thought, as this is the first week of RIAT announcements, I thought it'd be a good time to just sort of briefly touch on the announcements for RIAT this week. And obviously we've got a first year announcements for Cosford. So obviously this week in RIAT, we've seen the Finnish F-18 has been announced as flying with the Hawk on static display, which looks like it's going to be a really nice paint scheme one. How are we feeling about that? Are we starting to get a little bit of hype building for RIAT this year?
Yes.
For me, it's a bit early to get excited for RIAT, and I'm not doing Cosford. I did Cosford once, and I just shooting into the sun, but actually getting out of the air show put me right off being on that one. So I tend to do Fairford. I mean, what will be there. I'll turn up and shoot what's there.
Yeah, for me, it's very much a case of I like the announcements, but until it's wheels on the ground on Arrivals Day, then I won't believe any of the announcements. Certainly won't get excited until we get to sort of like the last couple of weeks. But even then, you could be a few days away, and they'll have a big ticket item like 2 B-52s that all of a sudden can't come. Interesting, this year's Cosford I'm going to Cosford. It's my first Cosford, so I'm quite looking forward to that one. I mean, so far all the announcements are things that I've already seen on multiple occasions. But yeah, seeing the Patrice Swiss again, because Ant, you and I saw them last year, didn't we, at the Duxford finale.
Did.
Great little display team they are.
Yeah, and we were lucky enough to see the practice display in the morning and the actual proper display in the afternoon, which was good for getting different light on the subjects and whatnot. But no, yeah, I think Cosford's sort of hit the ground running with its announcements. It's obviously stole a march on Riyadh, who have only just started their announcements this week, like you touched on. But yeah, I mean, it's the same with all air shows. I mean, last year we were looking forward to the Hungarian Gripen at Cosford, and then it cancelled, but then it reappeared at Riyadh, didn't it? And then, like you said, B-52s were due at Riyadh, and they disappeared within a few days of the show starting. But then we ended up with an E4 instead. So, yeah, like you say, wheels on the ground is better than social media posts about what's supposed to be coming.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I think it's after the last few years as well, just to have stuff coming is better than nothing at all, isn't it? And on the finish side of things, I think we've got some of that, some of those F-18s coming over for Cobra Warrior. So that might be quite interesting to see. Cobra Warrior at Waddington and Coningsby starts, I think, on the 6th of March. So there should be a nice selection of stuff. But again, like you say, it's not happening until there's wheels on the ground, is it? So,
well, with Cobra Warrior, I mean, like, I was at Coningsby yesterday and had a cracking day at the fence. But like, obviously, Coningsby being one of the bases that's involved in it, you hear a million and one different rumours at the fence, don't you? It's like, oh, the Indians are coming with their Tedges again. Oh, the Turks are bringing over their F-16s. Oh, the Turks are actually bringing their Phantoms, and it's just like, okay, I'll just turn up at Waddington next month and see what's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they released the mission patch for it today, didn't they? Which seemed to have on it the F-18. So presumably there is going to be some coming over.
And the Indians as well.
Yeah, the Indians.
Yeah. So it'd be good to see them if they do turn up.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll be there. I've got that week off. So for at least some of it, I shall be there doing what I do.
Cool. So obviously, then moving on from that, let's talk about the other forms of photography we do. Obviously, we're all best known for our aviation stuff. But let's start off with you, Ant, as you are based in the Midlands. What sort of photography do you get up to when you're in your downtime or in between air shows and things?
Anyone who's listened to the podcast before will know that I started in photography probably 4 or 5 years ago now, and I started doing landscapes. And very much like what Mark was saying, it was just I started doing photography just to get out of the house, just to not be confined to the same 4 walls all the time. So I was finding myself getting into places like Snowdonia, up into the Lake District, the Peak District, just getting out and about, getting active, and just taking the camera with me and seeing what I could do. Obviously, aviation took over from that once I discovered what the Mach Loop was and got back into air shows and stuff and whatnot. But obviously, I think everyone needs to have an alternate subject that they like to shoot, whether it's landscapes, whether it's wildlife or whatnot. I like to shoot street photography. So I like to get the camera and just put a prime lens on and wander around Birmingham city centre and just see what I can find and just take candid shots of people going about their daily business, some of the architecture, events if they're on. Just wander around, just see what I can get. So yeah, that's one thing I like to do, just to change things up a bit, especially because sometimes you can feel a little bit stale, like going to the same bases all the time, going to the same sort of like you get to so many air shows in a season, and you sort of think, oh God, another air show. I think I did like 10 last year, so I definitely felt like that towards the end of last year. So it's nice to have that sort of second or third option to go and take photos of. But I also, as well as that, I mean, I try to get out and do that as often as I can, but obviously it's sometimes difficult with childcare and whatnot and things like that. But I do also like to, which something I actually probably do more than the street photography, is a bit of sport photography. So my daughter plays, my second eldest daughter plays in a football team, under 15s. It's just a local team. They play on a Saturday. And a couple of years ago, I asked the manager if it was okay to take photos, and he was like, "Yeah, not a problem." And now I pretty much take the camera most weeks, taking photos of the games, and then just put all the photos into the group chat for the parents to have for themselves. So keeps you sharp, keeps your photography skills on point.
I say it does. I mean, I think, as you say, I think it's important that you have different forms of photography. I mean, because it is, as much as we love aviation, if we're going to the same bases and the same air shows, I mean, I go to multiple Duxford air shows, and I can guarantee that at each one of those air shows, the Catalina is going to fly. So there's only so many different ways you can take a picture of a Catalina, especially if it's the same one. And you need that change to keep yourself fresh. I feel like if you're taking the pictures of the same things over and over and over again, and with things like street photography, that changes on a day-to-day basis. You know, people are unpredictable. An airplane flying display, for example, it's going to do the same routine largely at every air show it goes to. If you're at a base, an airplane is going to take off in a direction, it's going to come back in the other direction unless the wind changes and they swap around. So you're going to get the same pictures over and over again. And there's an element of predictability about it, which I think what it can make you it can make you complacent and lazy sometimes. And I think sometimes it can kind of it will lull you into a situation where you kind of you can doubt yourself as well. If you're taking the pictures of the same thing, you become lazy, so you don't take good pictures, and you kind of then sit there and question yourself. I mean, street photography is something that I've always wanted to get into, but I've just never been able to. I don't think I can. I think one, it's a confidence thing. The idea of just walking up to someone, sticking a camera in their face, it just feels alien to me. I mean, obviously, you know, from Mark's side, if you've got a paying client or a paying model, they're used to having a camera in their face, whereas Joe Public is just trying to read a newspaper. If you're trying to get the right angle on him, he's going to be like a bit weird about it.
The weird thing is, you say that, and I thought that would be the case when I first started to do it. But they're just in their own little worlds. They don't even know you're there. They literally don't know you're there. I think the entire time I've been doing it, I don't think I've had anyone who's come up to me and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" Like, they literally just wander around in their own little universe, and you could take photos of them all day long, and they wouldn't even notice. I've had women sitting at bus stops singing like at the top of their voices. I've had like builders sitting there smoking on their phone, like just sort of, do you know what I mean? Just anything and everything. Just, do you know what I mean? It's just that people aspect that you sometimes miss in aviation. Yes. And the other good thing I find as well is some of the, obviously when you're shooting like fast jets or anything like that, or you're at an air show, you're following the planes around the sky, you'll get the taxi shots and stuff like that. You get all the usual sort of shots that you're used to seeing. But the good thing I think with street photography is you can play with different focal lengths. You can use a prime lens. You can use like wide open apertures, so you've got really shallow depth of fields, which is something that you can bring into your aviation photography as well. You can use reflections and things like that. Use lights and things, out of focus foregrounds. There's all different things that you can try and experiment with. I find in street photography that once I've done it, and I've done it a couple of times, and I sort of know what I'm doing with that little technique or skill, I'll then find, like yesterday when I was at Coningsby, I was on a ladder at the fence, shooting through the gap between the top of the fence and the barbed wire. And I thought, well, rather than just getting the jet through that, I pulled right back to 150 millimeters and actually got the barbed wire, the concrete post and the top of the fence as a frame around the jet, and it was completely out of focus. And that's made one of my favorite photos from yesterday. And I wouldn't have tried that if I didn't do street photography, because I wouldn't have thought to try it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things. I mean, I've been very guilty at times of falling into the trap of just ensuring that I've got the airplane and sky, and you know, using. I mean, there's a couple of pictures I've taken where I have used sort of the fence as a frame, as you say. But I think as aviation photographers, sometimes that for us, it's the idea is that you should always have the airplane in a nice, clean setting with no sort of edge noise effectively. And I think it's one of those things. It's one of those things why I'm a big advocate of having different types of photography and trying different types of photography, because you learn so much more. One, about composition, also about your camera, and about yourself as well. With something like street photography, you can't necessarily be walking around with a lens that's got a range from 150 to 600 millimeters. You've got to move yourself. If you've got a 50 mil prime lens and you've got to move to make that shot, you've got to crouch down or lay on the floor or whatever to get that shot. And I think with shooting other forms of photography, there's a change in mindset that brings in. It's sort of cleansing for your aviation mind, but at the same time, you're learning so much more by changing things up. It's great. There are people who live near airfields and they can go out every day and take pictures, and that is their thing. But sometimes, if you step away from that for a few days, even if it's just a few days, it's that different shift that brings in new and refreshing elements to it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's for me, it's something a bit like a reset or a refresh. You can spend a few days at Lakenheath or Coningsby getting decent shots like we all do, but when you get home, you think, well, last time I got the same shot, or am I playing it too safe? And I think that if you go out of your comfort zone more with street photography or sport, then those elements can creep into your aviation, like you just said, and you can feel a bit less safe, sort of a bit more dynamic in what you're trying to do. You can take more risks.
Well, it's about growing, isn't it? It's about growing as a photographer. So if you're going to keep going to Lakenheath like 7 times a year, or Coningsby 5 times a year, or every RIA, and you just come back with the same shots all the time, then it's going to become stale, isn't it? Like this year's RIA, my plan is I'm only going on one day, and the Saturday, and instead of standing show centre and just pointing my lens up at the sky, I'm going to go and stand up where all the aircraft are parked up, and just get shots of them taxiing and the crews getting into the jets and stuff, and the display aircraft. And then from there, I'll still be able to shoot the display. It'll just be at a different angle to what everyone else is getting. And that's what I want to do with my RIAT this year, because I've got probably 3,000 shots from last year's RIAT of planes in the sky that I haven't even touched yet or looked at or posted. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's pointless getting the same stuff.
Yeah, I'm the same. I go to I some years ago started doing FreeAt, so that's spending the whole week there. And every year I go with the intention of having a wander around trying to shoot different stuff. But every year I just sit down and shoot the same stuff. And this year I took about 7,000 or 8,000 images, and I've not even looked at half of them because I was just uninspired, because I just thought, well, I'm just shooting the same stuff. It's a plane in the sky, and whilst I love it, there's so much more to RIAT than shooting that stuff, and you can shoot it virtually anywhere. Okay, in the FreeAt stand you get the Monday departures, which are a bit, they're a bit nice. But on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you can just wander around and get it everywhere. So it's kind of like, yeah, I agree. Take a walk and get some different compositions. And I'm going to touch on someone like Mr. Cooper, Rich Cooper. If you look at his aviation, he does the aviation jets that we all love, but then he goes for the involving people. In it, and he gets his storytelling stuff. So he steps away from the norm and involves the audience, and captures something that grabs your attention. And I think it's shots like that, and I do occasionally. But yeah, I really want to this year. I think last year I was disappointed in my own shots, in the fact that it was just like no real progression. Yeah. It's just, I kind of thought, oh God, and I just found myself not really editing much. And I think that was my most disappointing aspect of my aviation photography last year, because I ruined it myself. And really, I just needed to get off my arse off the grandstand and stretch my legs and have a wander around, because I was there for a few days. So if I missed the display one day, I'd get it the next.
Yeah. I think part of the problem last year was that I think we were all just really glad that it was back.
Yes.
And obviously after having a 3-year gap for obvious reasons, I think people just were like, right, I just want to just get back into the groove, the vibe, the feeling of the festival that is Riat, and just enjoy it as much as you can. And then you sort of think, photographically speaking, afterwards, you thought, oh crap, I wanted to go and get that photo, or I wanted to go and get this photo, and I didn't. And you sort of by the time you get to the end of the show, your chance has gone, hasn't it? So
it's
I just
gone
want to
again.
Yeah.
I mean, I completely echo your sentiments, Marcus. Last year was my first experience of Freeat, so I was there for the whole week, and I said in my own head, I want to go walk around, do different things, see different things, and I was getting there first thing and then leaving as late as I could. But I kind of got swept up in this weird kind of a mix between excitement where I just had to take pictures of things, but then equally I was in this kind of like, I've got to take pictures because it might get taken away again. It was that, and I felt like I was so focused on making sure I captured what was flying that I didn't focus on my technique or trying to make things different. I was just trying to grab it in case we never had it again. And I think it's like what you're saying about Rich Cooper, how he brings the audience into things. This one of my big complaints about aviation photographers, and I'm as guilty as this myself, is that we focus a lot on the airplane. And when we go to an air show, we go to a museum, we go through a process where we'll try and cut people out, crop people out, and take out lines and things. But the reality is that's part of the story. It's. I mean, I've seen pictures from Riat last year where people have removed the entire background and just left an airplane sat there on the tarmac, and it's just like, why? You've got this. Yeah, it's a great airplane, but there's no context to it. There's no. And with something like Riat, it is a festival of aviation, and there's so much stuff going on. And one of the things I try and do now is I try and get as natural shots of aircrew and sort of people on the ground as well, like people who are moving on tug tractors and follow me vans and that sort of thing, just to try and bring in extra elements of the story. And sometimes you can catch someone who's just like, I mean, for us, whilst for us it is still a big thing, we've seen F-35s in the flesh quite regularly, whereas you might catch someone who's just in awe of this airplane, and be able to catch that, it adds an extra element to the scenes. And I love stuff like that. I love having crowds in pictures and that. 'Cause I think it just kind of it shows that you're at an active airfield and everyone's enjoying themselves and that sort of thing. I think it's really important to bring that in.
We've just said that Riat's a festival of aviation, and it wouldn't be what it is without the crowd there. So why are you cropping all the people out of your photo? It's just that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, don't get me wrong. If that person wanted just that aircraft and they were focusing on just that, then fair enough. But for me, it's like if you're at an event like that, capture the whole thing. Get like wide shots of the crowd with the Reds passing by or something with their smoke trails and stuff, or you can get the detailed shots afterwards. So you got to change it up. You can't always be at 600 millimeters all the time. And that's, I think, one thing I found I was guilty of last year was that I was always out at 600 millimeters and not thinking, well, I've got a prime lens in the bag, or I've got a 24-105 in the bag. Let's wander around and use that, which is something I want to change this year. But just, I mean, we've because we're aviation photographers and we love it, we've naturally sort of gone on a tangent back to aviation. So let's get Mike in.
I was going to say,
let's see what Mike's other passion is before we just turn into a Riat looking forward.
So Mike, tell us a bit about your photography background and sort of what you do to get your escape from airplanes.
Cool. So this will actually link in quite nicely actually with the last bit of discussion there where we digressed a bit further into aviation. So I'd like to take you all back, if you will, to 2012. We had the Olympics, and we also had Sir Bradley Wiggins winning the Tour de France, first ever British guy to win it. And I got completely swept along by that and basically fell in love with cycling. I did it for a few years, wasn't very good at it at all. And then when I got into photography, probably what year would have been, about 2015, I became aware that in Lincolnshire, where I live, we have, not only do we have, a brilliant aviation scene, we've also got probably one of the most iconic festivals of cycling that happens in the UK every year, which is the Lincoln Grand Prix. And the main events of that are obviously some road races that go through Lincoln City Centre, 8 laps. I think for the women, I think it's something like 13 laps for the men. And that includes this monumental hill called Steep Hill. And it's steep, it's cobbled, and it's just crazy. I couldn't go up it once, let alone 13 times. And I think 2015 we had the National Cycling Championships here in Lincoln. So that event became the National Championships for the year. And I thought, you know what, before I had my own camera, I'll take my dad's camera. And the thing that I love most about cycling is that it's so accessible. So you've not got fences, you've not got any barriers to it. You're basically standing at the side of the road or in their kind of, I don't know what you'd call it really. They're like paddock/pits area where their team buses are. You can go and you can just be there while they're warming up, while they're on their bus, where the mechanics are working on the bikes. And I remember that year I was stood basically 3 feet away from Mark Cavendish while he was warming up, just snapping away happily. He didn't care. Massive melee around him. It was just a little bit surreal, really. And again, I didn't really know what I was doing with the camera at that time, but it just ignited something that I think is probably there for aviation as well, where it's just there's an accessibility about it that's not quite there with other things. Like, wildlife is always around us, isn't it? But you've got to go and find it. You don't know when it's going to be, where it's going to be.
It's like an elite sport, isn't it? Cycling. It is.
Exactly.
They're elite athletes at the end of the day, and it's unusual to have a sport with elite athletes that you can just walk up 3 feet away from them and stick a lens in their face. It's just
That's exactly
you wouldn't be able to do that in the Premier League with football. You wouldn't be able to do it with F1. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't be able to go to Wimbledon and do that. Accessibility is dead right.
I've done motorsport. I said I've done motorsport. I haven't done motorsport. I've been to Silverstone to the Grand Prix and, sat in the grandstands and took some pictures. And, you've got all the same kind of barriers that we have at air bases. You've got tall fences, you've got things in the way. But when you are just a guy at the side of the road with a camera, it's, I don't want to say it's easy because it's never easy to get the right shot that you want, is it? But it just feels natural. And it seems to work. And, a lot of the techniques that we use in aviation are transferable. So these guys and girls, if you watch it on TV, you think you get a sense of the speed, but until you're stood, a couple of feet away from them, you can feel the pressure wave coming almost. And then when they go past, it's just like a wave again. And it's, you can put things like panning to good use. Again, different focal lengths I really like. I think the bit I want to link back to from the last conversation was again about the people. So yeah, you can take pictures of the racing, the bikes and all that. But one of my favourite sets, I think it was 18 months ago. Again, we lucky enough to have the National Championships again in Lincoln. First one back after COVID. And one of the riders in the women's race was a local girl. And she'd been professional for, I don't know, a few years. And she basically won the race in her hometown. And I was kind of there after the finish line to capture her first moments, seeing her family, seeing her friends again, seeing her, team manager. And that was more poignant, I think, than any pictures of her riding her bike. It was her, hugging her team boss, completely caught up in the emotion of all those years of hard work to finally win a national title. And that made it kind of feel a bit worthwhile for me, spending the time. And especially it was really cold as well. It was like October evening, and it just, it was a very pleasant experience, I think, and it just makes you hungry to do it. Hungry to do it again.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's quite funny. Is that cycling is one of those things that is, especially in this country, is quite popular now, and there's lots of sort of racing elements to it. And but I think again, it's something like that including the crowd in that is important, because I mean, yes, they are elite athletes and they're going sort of hell for leather. They've worked months, years for those races and that sort of thing, and so much of their achievements, it's driven on by the people there, the crowd that are there, they're there to, there's a lot said in football about the crowd being the 12th man. And I think that there is an element of that, because the crowd around it can push you on. And like we've said before, the crowd in a cycling aspect can make a great additional subject to it, can't they?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's annoyingly some really good pictures that I didn't take from this year's race in Lincoln, where I don't know if any of you are familiar with Lincoln, but there's in the uphill area, there's like a square where you've got the castle one side and you've got the cathedral the other, and the race comes through there. Again, it's all cobbled, and one of the buildings that overlooks it is a pub, and one of the guys is stood in the top window of the pub looking down, and you've got the crowds massed either side of the finish line, and the riders crossing the finish line at that moment where one of them takes victory. And I thought that was, again, a proper moment, because you can see the crowd all getting really into it. Obviously, there's the excitement of the guy winning, and again, it was not just about the guy winning; it was about the whole moment, and that was, one of those pictures that really stood out for me from this year. Just wish I'd taken it.
That's it, isn't it? It harks back to what I was saying about like pulling back sometimes and not being at 600 millimeters all the time. You can get like a cyclist on their bike perfectly framed at 500 mil, 600 mil, whatever. You can get an aircraft perfectly framed like that, but sometimes just pull back and show the whole scene of what's going on. Like tell a little bit of a story. And when you're talking about like someone who's put years of their life into a dedication like cycling, and they're winning like that lady you were describing did, then yeah, I mean, sometimes some of the photos we take in aviation, they're a bit cold. I'll use the word in inverted commas. Is that
I agree.
They're sort of like they're inanimate objects. Yeah, you've got the pilot in there, but sometimes you might get a little bit of a wave or a sort of a hand gesture or something from them, but that emotional side of photography is something that we probably miss out on being aviation photographers, because you don't see it as much. Certainly not people hugging and sort of kissing at the end of a display at an air show, is there? Or when someone's completed a Mach Loop sortie or something like that. It's not the sort of done thing, but.
Yeah, I'm just going to. Ant says about all the emotion and that. A photo I took of my Amanda. She walked around the Isle of Wight. So it was a 100k walk. And I got a shot of her walking across the finish line, and she was in pieces. She was bawling. She was broke. She was just fucking broke. And I got a photo of her, and I was kind of torn, because photography wise, I was like, man, this is superb. It's absolutely superb. But then I'm thinking, bless her. She's a total wreck coming across that line, because she'd been walking for I think 30 hours through the night and everything, but capturing it. I think storytelling is a massive part of photography. And I'm a panel member with the Guild of Photographers, so I judge images every month, and a big part of how an image scores is storytelling, as well as composition, as well as the focusing, the editing, the congruency of an image working. Storytelling is probably the most powerful a thing of any photograph. And if you look back in history, all the moments, it's all caught with a photo. You got that Vietnam War one, haven't you? There's some really, it doesn't have to be a great photo, technically, but if it captures the story of the emotion, that's a massive part of it. And yeah, in aviation, we often do miss that part of it. We just take a photo of a jet. Like this morning, I'm down at Lake and Eve, burners are going, it's great, but it's, I've got the shot 50 million times now. So it's nice, I was down there the other day, and I shot an F-15 going through the back of some trees, and it just added something to it. It's just a bit more storytelling. It's such a key thing for any aspect of photography.
Yeah. I totally agree, and that's one of the reasons why I don't want to sit at show centre this year at RIA. And some of my favourite photos that I've taken at air shows over the last year. One that sticks in my mind actually was the Battle of Britain air show at Headcorn, not Duxford. a couple of years ago. They obviously had, I think it was about 10, maybe 11 Spitfires flying in like a Balbo at the end. And one of my favourite shots, I mean, the weather was truly atrocious all day long. I mean, it was just threatening to rain all day. It did in fits and starts, and then it was just really grey and miserable, and it was just horrendous conditions. But then, literally, as the last plane touched down, Acorn, obviously the sun came out. But one of my favourite shots from that day was the 10 or 11 Spitfire pilots just stood around in their flight suits, just talking. And just with the Spitfire in the background, like, so you got that context of who they are and what they do. But they're just there having a laugh and a joke, talking about how the display went, and that's one of my favourite shots from that day because it's got that people aspect and that's that story aspect of the photo.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I think one of the important things to try and get, and we do miss it as aviation photographers when we are taking pictures of an airplane, it is the story. I mean, sometimes I've found that sometimes the best story isn't the best photo. So I hark back to a picture taken by photojournalism is one of the I love photojournalism, and I think that some of the photos people get from that really tell stories, and it comes back to that sort of street photography thing. I couldn't do it because at the same, it might be a natural disaster or something, and sticking a camera in someone's face is
totally
not the ideal situation, but it's kind of, it needs to be done to tell a story. And I think back to a picture by I don't know if you guys know photographer Robert Capa. He was quite like a military journalist photographer in the sort of Spanish Civil War and World War II and that. And he came aboard on one of the waves after D-Day, and he had his camera with him, and he took a bunch of photos, and it ended up being the camera ended up being passed off to a junior officer who then went to get developed and managed to, I think effectively what happened is they took the film out in sunlight and completely ruined everything but one picture that was managed to be saved. And it's sort of one guy wrapped up against a sort of an anti-tank defense on the beach, and it tells the story of the D-Day invasion so well. But it's because it was just sort of the only shot that survived. It wasn't one of the perfect shots he's taken, but it shows the emotion. It shows the story of what was happening, the frantic nature and everything of it. And it's so important that pictures tell a story. I mean, I used to go to photography clubs, and you get lots of lovely pictures coming in that are technically brilliant, but it's like, what's the story behind this? What am I seeing here?
Well, like you and Mark have both alluded to, like some of the best photos in history are technically abysmal, really, but they were in the right place at the right time and they captured a moment. That's what it's about, isn't it? I mean, the one that springs to mind, it's only because I watched a documentary on YouTube about it the other day. I'm probably a little bit morbid, but I'll go there anyway. But the photographer that caught the falling man from the Twin Towers in 9/11. Now he's been in some circles vilified for that photo, and people still to this day can't look at that photo. But if you look at the photo and you think about it technically, the man's not in focus. It's grainy. Do you know what I mean? You could sit there and really critique the actual technical nature of the photo, but it's one of them images that will be around for hundreds of years that people will look back on and go, what must that person have been going through in that moment?
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things. Again, it's like, again, being morbid. You sort of like photos of the Holocaust and from the concentration camp stuff. It's like they're horrible pictures to look at, and and in your mind you sort of question, why was that photo taken? But when you sit back in the cold light of day and you think, if that picture's not taken, we don't have a record of it. When we don't have a record of it, we can't point and go, this can't happen again. It's they become important documentaries of history. And in the process of taking it, it might be a bit morbid that you're taking people jumping out of the towers, but that stands as a record now of something that happened, and we can always go back and go, something like this can never happen again. There should never ever be a situation whereby people are jumping for thinking the best course of action is to jump off of a however many floor building like that. It's so important that we capture the stories, and whether the photos are good or not, it's that human element adds so much to everything, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the same photographer, who took that photo was actually there when it wasn't JFK, but it might have been his brother. Was it Robert Kennedy?
Yeah.
Was shot. He was there at that moment, and there's a photo of him taking a photo that he took, basically stood on a table over Robert Kennedy as he lay there dying.
Mm.
And again, it's another photo that he's been heavily sort of criticised for over the years, but his response to that sort of criticism is, and we're talking like photojournalism here, that's his job. It's his job to record these moments, these historic events. It's his job to sort of capture that and to sort of deliver that image to not only the press agencies and the newspapers and nowadays the online media and whatnot, but to everyone on the planet, so that they can see what happened and learn from it, hopefully, and sort of move on from it.
You can't just take photos of pretty stuff, can you?
No, you can't. You just can't.
That's not what photojournalism is about. It's sometimes it is to shock you, whether intentionally or not. But it's storytelling, and not every story's got a happy ending, unfortunately.
Well, look at the news at the moment. Is there any good news on the news these days?
No, especially some of the stuff that's coming out of Turkey and Syria at the minute. And some of that is just it's unreal. You just can't. I mean, you think you've seen it all, and then all of a sudden something like that will come along, and you just think,
puts your life into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does indeed.
It really does. It really does. This got deep quick, didn't it?
It did. Let's back on the planes. Back on the planes.
So okay. So let's move on from that then. Let's move on to you, Mark. Tell us a bit more in depth about what you do. I mean, obviously, most of the stuff you do now is metal birds and feather birds. So, sort of tell us a bit about
that. I mean, aviation aside, really. I mean, the wildlife side of it is something that me and Amanda can share. So we do trips, we do little breaks where it will involve walking, but it will involve wildlife as well. So we've just come back from Greece. We spent 5 days in Greece shooting Dalmatian pelicans. Well, I was doing the photography, Amanda was watching, and it was fantastic scenery, a good getaway, but you're active. I'm shooting stuff I love, we're both together, so it is kind of good. But with the wildlife photography, even if we're going out to an RSPB reserve or just out on a long walk where pretty much there might be buzzards or kestrels or stuff like that, the wildlife for me it's a good downtime as well. It's a very peaceful kind of pastime. It kind of really gets rid of your stress. I remember during COVID when we was all locked in, I did a Birds in the Garden project for a magazine, and I was basically just getting stuff in the garden and making perches. I did a reflection pond with a sort of like a garden tray, and setting up all sorts of shots. Because obviously in that time we were going sort of stir crazy, stuck in our houses and gardens. And we were lucky that the weather at the time was lovely. But we were kind of, trying to keep ourselves busy. So wildlife, for me and Amanda, sort of kept us sane, really, because we could sit in our garden with, the birds would come along. I'd be happy doing the photography. Amanda would be sat there with a glass of wine, possibly, watching as well. But it's kind of relaxing, and it's, you've got your photography going there, but it's also just peaceful watching. We could get up early in the morning, toddle out to the garden, and come back. But it's just kind of a stress relief. But we travel around. We go up to Scotland, which is nice. It's a good drive up to Scotland. We go to the Cairngorms, so we sort of shoot in mountain hare is a particular favourite of mine. I've still not got the shot I want, which is a mountain hare in the snow, because every time I've been to Scotland when it should be snowing, it hasn't. The closest I got was the morning we left. After 10 days, it started snowing, and I wasn't a happy bunny. No pun intended. But with mountain hares, just for the people that don't know, they change colour in the winter. So mountain hare are hunted by eagles, and when it's snow, obviously they're very easy to find if they're brown. So in winter, their coats change to white. So getting a white mountain hare in the white snow is a lovely picture that I've never achieved. Although I did Photoshop one to make it look like it had been snowing. Oh, gosh, like a sky replacement. Let's not go there. But it's great there. You can see eagles. You've got stag. You've got all sorts. But it's a great place to de-stress. My wildlife very much is a couple thing as well. We both do stuff together. But we've had trips all over. We don't tend to venture south where we live, which is sort of Midlands. We're Milton Keynes, unfortunately. So it's typically northern side of things. So we have been to sort of Lincoln. We do Snowdonia, places like that. And when we go to see our friends in America, quite often we'll go to nature reserves over there. So you're seeing totally different kind of wildlife. But again, it's not holiday kind of stuff, but it's great. It gets you out to want to do stuff, and you're doing it together, which is great. So you can have a day out at a nature reserve, and it's really good fun. We went to Mexico last year as a beach holiday, but I always take my camera with the 200-600 lens on it, and just wandering around the resort was some fantastic wildlife. There were pelicans diving in the sea. There was an osprey diving, catching fish. Just at the back of where we were sunbathing, I actually found a pygmy owl, which are about 6 inches tall. Just absolute total fluke that I spotted it. So it's kind of, I mean, I absolutely love wildlife. It's a very much a big passion. I don't do as much at the moment as I have been because we just got a dog last year. So it means obviously a lot of nature reserves you're not allowed to take them, although the dog is a mini dachshund, so it's so bloody small it wouldn't do anything anyway.
Yeah.
But it's kind of taken a back step. But I have a lot of friends that do wildlife photography as well, and it's a real chilled out hobby, really. Unless you get a rare bird. If you get a rare bird, then it can get a bit crazy with people. We went to see one bird once, and that was out Lincoln Way. And I kid you not, I mean, it was the size, I forget what it was called. I should remember, and it's like a robin, but it's got a blue throat. But it was, we was driving down this road, and I said, well, it's obviously over there. And I kid you not, there must have been 70 to 80 photographers looking at the bird the size of a robin. Literally, they'd surrounded it with tripods. Some people laying on the ground, some people with tripods, waiting for this tiny little bird to walk out of the rushes where it was to catch a mealworm. And as soon as it came out, it was like paparazzi. It was like everyone's saying about be quiet, but actually it did not give a shit. It just came out, pecked away all this bloody racket, had a look at people and went back in. So it can be quite calming until there's a rare bird around, because you can get apps that will tell you roughly the location. And then the very keen birders, as we are spotters, they are birders. God, don't call them twitchers. The birders will, they're as, and they'll fight you for the best spot. It's a bit like a bum fight at going to see Just Jane at Kirkby. It's everyone wants it head on the centre line, and it's the photographers when they got a rare bird are just the same. It's all for one. It's crazy, but on the whole, it's so relaxing. There's nothing like wildlife photography, really. The hard thing with wildlife photography is getting the good shots, because unless you can pay for the professional hides, where it is kind of easy, to be fair. I mean, I can guess a paid hide shot a mile off, and I see them time and time again as a judge. But when you're out in the wild, it's very difficult to have that perfect backdrop, because obviously with a backdrop you want some distance from the subject to the background, so you got that nice bokeh. There's going to be twigs in a bloody way, that the sun's in the wrong direction. It's nestled in amongst all sorts of stuff. It's so difficult. So it's very hard sometimes to get the perfect shots, and sometimes you just have to work for it as well if you can get into the position. So you really do have to think about it. But I think it's a great pastime, and it links very, very well with aviation. So many friends of mine are very much into the wildlife as well.
To be honest, Mark, some of the shots you've got in the last 12 months from like wildlife, specifically birds, Like they've blown me away, and they've actually made me want to start trying to get shots because, like, firstly, the puffins that you got over on was it Skoma? I think it was.
Yeah, that's right. So that was our first trip to Skoma. Typically, we do Northumberland. We've been going there for over 10 years, and we'd take a trip out to the Farne Islands in sea houses.
Yeah.
But you only get sort of an hour to take photos of puffins. It's brilliant, but it is kind of like a shooting range. You are in amongst the puffins, and they fly really fast. We went to Skoma. Skoma has like a little hostel. There's about 16 beds there, so you can stay on the island for either 2 nights or 3 nights. But the booking opens and it sells out within a couple of hours. But we managed to get on it. We went there last year just for 2 nights. But you can basically go out when you want. So because you stay there, whilst they have day trippers going there, you really miss out on the best time of day. With wildlife, the best time of day is first thing and last thing. Sunrise, sunset. It's very much like landscape photography. So yeah, we were going out at sort of 5:30 in the morning. So I was getting the sunrise pictures, so nice. I kind of like the silhouette pictures of puffins. So I'd go out in the morning and get those, come back, we'd have breakfast. I'd then go out. I did get some nice head-on shots of puffins coming in with the sand eels in their mouth. That was about 11. That was about 11 o'clock because I did want the sun in a certain position. So I'd kind of went out and saw the shot I wanted, but the light really wasn't right for it. So we went back and then came out and got that. And then it was a matter of just, we had some great walks around the island. It's a lovely trip if you can ever do it. It's a great island to get onto.
Yeah, to be honest, I've wanted to get over to Skoma for the last couple of years to just try my hand at like getting some like puffin shots and just to see the place with my own eyes. But
it's very good. Probably a day trip would probably be okay for that because quite often, and I had this. So we went to Greece with the Dalmatian pelicans. But what I found was because I was so desperate to shoot Dalmatian pelicans, most of the shots I got on the first and the second day were shots of Dalmatian pelicans. And I was over the moon with them, but there really wasn't much thought that went into it. And it was really only on the last day that I got my best shots there because I'd calmed down.
Yeah,
because I'd taken a few thousand shots of the pelicans, and then my brain was saying, "Okay, I've got all these, but there's really nothing that's grabbing me at the moment. They're all brilliant, well, not all brilliant, but they're all because they were such a great subject. It's a bit like puffins; they're so unique.
Yeah,
everyone sees a puffin, and it's crazy. But then you've got to take photos, and as photographers, we want the best we can.
Yeah.
So probably a day trip to Skoma initially. For someone like you who's not shot puffins would be brilliant because you'll be overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
That probably photography will take second place. You're walking around and the puffins will come and walk in front of you, and they are the most incredible birds to see. And literally their burrows are at the sides of the path, so they tell you very strictly there you stay on the path.
Yeah.
Stay on the path. Do not venture. You get some photographers, and we get it in every genre, that will push the limits, and they will to get that shot, which they never get. But literally, these puffins, you'll walk by them. You can get phone shots of some really nice portrait shots of the puffins with your phone. They're that near to you.
Yeah,
but
it's crazy.
If you've never seen them before, it can be like, what the hell am I doing here? It's crazy. You've got puffins, so they've got their burrows. They have one. They give birth to one puffling. And that's all they have, and they feed that puffling sand eel. So they'll leave their burrow. They go out to the sea. They'll get their beak full of sand eels, and then they come back in. What happens when they come in is the gulls want the sand eels. So they're coming in. The gulls attack them. And they'll either make it through the gauntlet of gulls back into their burrow, or what they do is they fly around again, and they keep trying to get that. And it's a crazy spectacle to watch. But you can literally be standing on a path, and puffins will be whizzing by your ear, and you can feel the wind as they go by, and it's kind of surreal. So again, it's like photography almost steps back, and it's the experience of like, whoa, what is going on here? There's so much, and it's such an alive place, Skoma and the Farne Islands.
Yeah,
but it's kind of very magical. And once you've done it once, you will keep wanting to go back.
yeah, definitely. It's like the
highly
shots,
recommend it.
the shots that you got, and I mean, I've seen shots from there before from different photographers, but specifically that one that you mentioned with the sand eels in the mouth and the wings sort of
Yes.
outstretched. That was, I think we were all, when we saw that, we're just like, oh wow.
I mean, I've been trying for probably 7, 8, 9 years to get that shot. You'll get, it's a bit like aviation. Anyone can rock up at Lakenheath and Coningsby or Fairford anyway and get shots of aircraft. You go to Skomer and Farne Islands, get shots of puffins, but there's a massive gap between a shot of something and a shot of something. I mean, I met a guy going back to Greece because it's very recent, but the guy we was there with is another level because he shot them so many times. He's looking for that unique image constantly. So, I got a few shots that were good, but the first couple of days they were just pelican shots. His shots are on another level because there's that thought that goes into it. So going back to the puffins in Skomer, it's kind of like once you've got into that, great, you start then adjusting your mindset to, okay, well, what shot do I want? And everyone wants that puffin coming towards you with a beak full of sand eels. So then you start sussing out what the puffins are doing. Like I say, they leave the burrow, they go round, they get the sand eels, then they come round. So you can start watching them. And you go, okay, it's coming in. Oh, it didn't make it that time. And you can actually watch them go around a full circle. So you watch which ones are coming to the burrows, and you kind of got to wait. And sometimes you'll get it, sometimes you won't. But on that occasion last year, I did get it, and it was one of those moments. It was a big crop, unfortunately, but it was one of those moments you looked on the back of the camera and go, I've got it now. Actually got the shot I've always wanted. So it's kind of a slam dunk on that. So on to kind of the next shot, which I got there also, because again, you've got more time there. If you've got an hour on an island, it's panic. But we were there for a couple of days. This year we're booked in for 3 days. But again, you could go out and the weather's pants.
That's it.
So you can get different images when the weather's not so good, but it can scupper the whole day. And when you're on islands, sometimes the boat you can book in. So we're booked in for 3 days, but if the weather's not right, the boat won't go, and that's your trip gone.
But
Skomer, highly recommend it.
I think like I say, you've definitely inspired me to go, and I'm pretty sure that I will do a day trip at some point when I can squeeze it into the schedule. But I think just drawing parallels back to aviation photography, and specifically about what you were just talking about there, with thinking about the shot before you take it. I think we were all, the first time we all went to an air base or an air show, just there spraying and praying and just shooting everything and coming back with 20,000 shots to sort through and whatnot. And we probably, like we've all already mentioned, we were probably guilty of that last year at Riyadh as well. But
I'm yesterday, still guilty of that.
Yesterday, when I was at Coningsby, I didn't do that, and I was just thinking, right, there's a list of shots that I know the spot I'm going to at Coningsby because I've been there before. I've done the groundwork. I've put the time in before. I know where I'm going. I know where the light's going to be. I know what the conditions are going to be. I know the sort of shots that I want to get. And I went there and I thought like that whilst I was there for the entire day. And I think that ties in very closely to what you were just describing about the puffins, in that you've put the time in over the years and that you've been chasing a specific shot for all that time. And then thankfully last year you got it. Yeah. You say it was a massive crop, but we'll never know because you got a Sony A1 and you could crop like a million times in and it would still look great.
The thing I found about Mark is he'll say, "Oh yeah, that was a heavy crop, or it was just a picture of a Dalmatian pelican." Those Dalmatian pelican shots, I was at one point very close to just throwing my camera in the bin and just giving up completely.
And some of those shots have got no crops. It's crazy. Absolutely.
Well, I mean. So I was going to say, my next question was going to be talk to me about pelicans because those shots you came back from, was it Greece? Was it?
It was Greece. It was the Kikini Nature Reserve, I think it was Lake Kikini, so northern Greece. But it's the pelicans themselves. So I didn't know this before I went over. There's 9 species of pelicans, and these are the biggest of the pelicans. But they are absolutely stunning. But you can only generally capture them photographically, really, during the winter months, because when the water's warm, they can fish, so they don't come near you. When the water gets cold, the fish go low, so the pelicans can't dive down to get them. So the local fishermen basically feed them the fish that they don't need.
Right.
So the pelicans are okay.
That
so
gives you the photographic opportunity to catch them.
So what's happened over years? It's a bit like Giggling Farm for red kites. There's loads of kite there, and they've been kept there because they get fed. So the pelicans know there's food and they get fed. So what's happened is wildlife photographers or wildlife photographer companies, tour companies, have latched onto this, and they're setting up all these tours, and you can go out on boats and go by the shore and capture these absolutely insane images. But it's they are really, really good images. But if we put it really, when you've got a great subject in such fantastic surroundings, it's a bit like having a stunning model in a studio. You can't really take a bad photo. You can, but my Amanda took some good photos of a little point and shoot. She's got a Scooby on how to take a photo, but it's like, and she's come back with some great shots.
Yeah,
because the subject is great. A point and shoot is focusing well. You've got a backdrop of snow-topped mountains.
Yeah.
And a gorgeous pelican. It's so you're going to come away with some good shots anyway. But this is where the creative mind comes in, and you've got to make better shots than the average shots.
Well, that's it, because I don't think she was putting her point and shoot in the water like you were with your Sony A1.
I was so worried with my camera. I was hanging over the side of this boat. And in fact, this is where, thank the Lord for mirrorless, because you could not have done it with a DSLR. No way. Because you've got your eye autofocus now. You've flipped your screen up. I normally back button focus, but I had to de-action that one, so the shutter. But I was literally hanging over. I've moved the little tripod thingy upwards, hung it over, kind of roughly where I thought, and I was just pressing the button. But the thing is, with wildlife and a lot of even aviation, it's the lower you get, the better the perspective. And the lower you get, if you take a photo of a bird looking down in your garden, it's not going to have anything particularly well. It could be a blackbird eating a bit of bread. If you lie down on the grass with it, the background just disappears. You've got all that soft bokeh, and it's the same with anything. So again, with any subjects really with wildlife, it's getting on their sort of eye level really. So hanging it out the boat, and it wasn't easy. My ribs were hurt. But because it was a boat with about 8 people on, every time it rocked, and it was moving as well. But if there was a large person on there, which there was, when they moved, the boat kind of really tipped. So I was wanting my camera level with the water. So when it tipped, it literally went under. And I reckon it was only probably about an eighth under, but it was enough that when I picked my camera up and tilted it, the water was coming out of the lens hood. It was like a watering can. So it was kind of like, so a big thumbs up to Sony. They are weatherproof.
Yeah.
But there was a couple of shots that came back that if I didn't get the right camera angle, the shots wouldn't have been the same. And other people on that boat trip, whilst they were low, they weren't low.
Yeah.
And like we all know with the ladies, a few inches can make a big difference.
Yes, indeed.
Indeed.
No, it's really interesting, mate, because like I say, some of your non-aviation shots are really inspiring. And although I probably haven't got the budget for Greece at the minute, and pelicans, Skoma's much more achievable. So
Skoma's it's a cracking day out, and even if you've got stuff in Wales, you've got Giggling Farm. Which is a red kite centre. There's numerous different hides there. There's low hides, medium height, there's high height. But it is just, the farmer comes out every day, same time, and the meat goes down, and it's just like it's just a fest of birds everywhere. But again, it's difficult. You've got to latch onto a bird, and it's the same with the puffins. You find a bird and you latch onto it. Giggling Farm, it's a great day out. Just go there and just go, this is awesome, and just focus on a red kite and just keep shooting, and they will do some great stuff for you. There's some great wildlife days out there. There really are. I mentioned very early on, and there's RSPB Bempton Cliffs up north. Brilliant day out. Gannets there are a fantastic bird to watch, and it's You go along there, you've got lovely gannets, you've got the views are great. There's puffins there as well. And they have a resident barn out there. So there's some great days out to be had with wildlife, really great days out. And you can mix it in with family as well.
Yeah.
So you get some brownie points out when you want to sneak off. You want to sneak off to an airbase.
That's it. You got to cash them in, ain't you? You got to cash them in.
Yeah,
Rob, what about you? Because you've sort of orchestrated this whole podcast so far, and we've not heard about your extracurricular pursuits outside of aviation.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. A lot of what Mark says resonates with me and what I do in my photography. I mean, I came to photography very late. I mean, I was about 30 when I first picked up a camera, and the main reason I did it was because the wife and I travel around a lot, and we sort of go abroad quite a lot, and we used to go to a lot of English heritage sites and National Trust stuff. And I used to just take a camera with me everywhere. And I still do. Wherever I go on holiday, I've got a camera with me because you never know what you're going to catch. And over the years, I kind of started moving towards focusing more on sort of landscape stuff and seascape stuff. Most particularly, I mean, East Anglia is sort of one of my favourite grounds. I remember a photographer once said, he said, it's great being able to go to loads of different locations, but pick a location and get to know it really well. So for me, landscape and seascape photography is something that has become my default separate thing from aviation photography. And more specifically, I'm mostly interested in the human impact on landscapes and seascapes. So I don't like the big wide vistas that you'll get within, like, but you get the photographers that go all the way to a mountain and get like a big mountain shot and stuff. That doesn't interest me. But where if you've got a sunset in Norfolk, because Norfolk is great for big skies and big like sunsets and sunrises. But if you've got, I mean, one of the things that I focus on quite a lot in Norfolk is abandoned churches, right? So I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form, but I have a massive respect for the design and sort of stories behind churches. Now, in Norfolk, there are believed to be, I think, somewhere around 100 former towns and villages that have, over the years since medieval times, disappeared. But each one of those, well, they would have had a church, and over the years, those churches have become abandoned because of reasons for like the seas moved and that sort of thing. So you can find lots of different churches in Norfolk in different states of ruin from different eras in time. I mean, there are some there that are sort of nearly 1,000 years old. And along the seafront, you obviously get there's lots of World War II defences and pillboxes and stuff, lighthouses and piers, and it's being able to bring those elements of the human interaction in the landscape. That is one of the things that I really am passionate about. And equally, it's like Mark says, there's a sort of a real calming nature to it, because the best time for landscape photography is first thing in the morning and just before the sun goes down. And I mean, for me, it's a real kind of therapy, because I'll go, and normally it's got to be in the winter, because during the summer months you've got to be up at like 3 o'clock in the morning for a sunrise, but it's like you're looking sort of any time from about when the clocks change in October through to when the clocks change in March tends to be the prime period for it. But there's a certain aspect about seascape photography, especially, is you'll be down on the beach at sort of 5:30 in the morning in the dark. You've worked out roughly where the sun's going to be. You can judge what the sky is going to be like, because you can see what the clouds are going to be doing, and you can move around for a bit. Then you set your tripod up, and then it's just you and the world around you. There's no people around. You might occasionally get the odd dog walker, and occasionally you'll get another photographer out there. And that's one of the joyful things I like about it, is that because of the times are so antisocial, it's not very often, unless there's going to be a solar eclipse or something right above Cromer Pier, for example, you're going to get, you'll very rarely see anyone else who's a photographer. So it's really easy not to get in each other's way, which is good. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's just like, I've taken so many pictures of sort of Cromer Pier and sort of around that area, but the one thing I can guarantee with landscape and seascape photography is no picture will ever be the same. And one of the things I do tend to do is I like to sometimes go back to the same spot, set up in the same spot, and then look at the pictures I've taken from that same spot. And there is nothing similar about any of them. It's all different. The cloud formations are different. The sky colors are different. The way the lights are reacting on the sea is different. The amount of sea spray is different. And it's one of those things that you can, if you've got limited time, but you're willing to get up and stay till late, you can get so many different pictures just by going to the same place. And then within that, with seaside towns especially, there's a certain kind of, I mean, if you ignore the places like sort of Great Yarmouth and Hunstanton, where they're a little bit kind of modernized, sort of kind of tacky seaside towns, if you go places like Cromer or Whitby, Southwold, and but anywhere in Cornwall, basically along the coast, there's, when you step back off of the seafront, when the sun's up, you can walk around, you can get some lovely shots of old sort of classic towns. And it's especially when you go to seaside towns, a lot of it is to do with, a lot of the main thing outside tourism is fishing. And one of the things I love to do is I love to go get my sunrise shots, and then I walk down and I'll go to sort of the harbour or where they're pushing the boats out and watch the fishermen doing their things, and then trying to catch them, bringing the catch back in later on. I mean, in Cromer, for example, they literally push the boats down the beach and they ram them into the sea on the back of a tractor, and it's quite fun just to sit there and watch the day-to-day life of people within this landscape. And it is one of those things. I love the seascape and landscape photography is the thing that I don't do with the wife, because the hours are so antisocial that she just says that just disappear for a weekend and do your thing. I just love just sitting there, peace and quiet, and just watching the sun come up. And it's one of those things as well. It's, you can keep snapping, but you can't, because you get to a point where the light is fleeting. The light might be perfect for 4 or 5 seconds, and that's when you've got to catch it. And there's a challenge to it, because obviously if the sun's coming up, your camera settings have to change. Every time a bit more light, you have to change the settings. But getting that shot is a real challenge. And then you just get to a point where that's it, buff, light's gone. And it's that yes, you can do take pictures, but they're just going to be pictures. And it's therapeutic, but there sometimes there'll be a mad frantic one, especially if it's a cloudy day, and then you get a chink of sun. It's like, oh quick, I've got to get it now. And it's that therapy that you get from it, that calming sort of just chilled out, relaxing things. And then again, I mean, as I said, we travel a lot, so we go around Europe to a lot of sort of old towns. I always take a camera with me, because it's one of those things where I can just wander off and take pictures of the architecture or cobbled streets and whatever. Or we went to Valletta, and there's loads of still World War II damage and medieval war damage, and walk around there. I can do that. The wife can sit there, she can have a glass of wine, and I love doing stuff like that, because it's so different from aviation. And as I said earlier on, I'm a big proponent for trying different things and shooting different genres and types of photography, because you just learn so much more than just because you just end up in a situation where you can just be right. Well, I'm going to be shutter priority. I'm going to have auto ISO, and that's it. You just then fire away. When you're doing sort of landscape photography, street photography, or wildlife photography, you have to change. You can't just stick with a setting and hope that it's going to work. You have to adapt yourself, and you learn so much more from it.
That's the one thing that ties all of these different photographic pursuits outside of aviation together, is the fact that you're learning new skills with the camera, and you're sort of progressing forwards, and it gives you like you said, like an escape sort of thing, and you can sort of take things at your own pace. That's why I like going low level spotting, like going back to aviation. Like, you spend hours at a time just standing on the side of a mountain waiting for a jet to come through, but those times are so calming, and you can just chill out and just watch the world go by, watch like this small stream of cars going past on the A road below you, sort of thing, and just be at one with the world until a fast jet comes through and wakes you back up again, and all of a sudden it's a mad 20 seconds.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's one of those things we lose as aviation photographers, because we are guilty of rocking up somewhere and just firing away at things in the sky. We kind of lose that we got into photography for different reasons, and we have different passions outside of that. And I think it's always, and it's one of the things I want to do more with this podcast, is to talk more about what we are as photographers and that, because I feel like we can talk about airplanes and that till the cows come home, but there's so much more to photography. And I think we run the risk of losing it at times just by, I don't define myself as an aviation photographer. I call myself a photographer. I just happen to shoot aviation. And I think it's one of those things that it's easy to forget, but it's so important to remember that there are other things out there. And I think it's so rewarding when you do step away from the fence and try different things.
Definitely. Totally agree.
Agreed.
But I think with that in mind, I think we're getting towards the end. So what I wanted to do is just one final little quick fire thing, just to sort of round us off a little bit. So your favorite photography location or event? Anthony, go.
Oh, location. Probably the Ogwen Valley in Snowdonia, because that's where I cut my teeth doing my landscape photography. And I had plans on going back up there a few weeks back when it was snowing up there, to get back in the mountains with the snow and whatnot. So I'll always love that place because it's what got me into photography. And yeah, I do try and go back as often as I can when I'm not distracted by planes.
Wonderful, lovely. Mike.
I was actually thinking about this earlier, and I know I've talked about cycling, but one of the favourite places I've ever taken photos is actually in Lisbon, and it was probably the only time I've really dabbled in street photography. And you know, I'm one of the shyest people you meet, but you know, I was happy just chatting to people who might not even spoken English, just asking them if they mind having their picture taken, or just going about their business, snapping away. And you know, everybody was, like Ant said, everybody was up for it. And there's just something about the way that the city is. It's you know, there's trams that are like probably nearly 100 years old, and just street artists, musicians, just everything going on everywhere. And it was just, if you're into photography in any way, it was just like a paradise of just things going on. So yeah, really loved it there. Recommend it for anybody who's traveling. Take a camera.
Mark, what about you?
Favourite places, or a favourite place for me is going back to Northumberland and sea houses where you've got the Farne Islands. The puffins are always been a big draw for me for 10 or so years. So yeah, I look forward to that trip every year. Puffins, terns, seals. You're going out on the boats. One day it'll be rough water, next day it's like going out on a sheet of glass. It's incredible. So it's something I look forward to every year.
Lovely stuff. From my side, it is like Mike. It is somewhere international, and it's Bled in Slovenia. I've only been there a couple of times, but I'm looking to go back again. The lake there, it's one of those places where it is impossible to take a bad shot. I'm sure it's one of those, if you search it, it's just like, it's this lovely idyllic lake within the middle of the mountains. And
I think I know the one that you're talking about, because my old television, an LG television, used to use a picture of that lake. Has it got like a little island?
An island with a church in the middle.
Church on it, yeah. That was the
Yeah,
screensaver on my TV for about 6 years, so I know exactly where you're on about.
Yeah, it's really handy. They've got this little walkway that's on the sort of the banks of the lake, and it takes you around, and you can get this big wide vista in where you've got the mountains on the left hand side, and depending what time of year it is, they'll be covered in snow. On the right hand side of it, you can get the church, the island of the church in, and it's. I mean, I've been twice in 2 different seasons, and the shots are so very, very different, even though they are from practically the same spot. It's such an amazing place to go, and it helps that they've also got this really nice cake, a local cake they've got. It's like the cream slice, custard slice dessert sort of things. They have one of those, but they are massive.
Yeah,
and it's one of the nicest cakes you'll find anywhere in Europe.
Oh, you sold me. It's got a nice lake and cake. Lake and cake. Happy days. It's on my list now.
Slovenia is lovely. I mean, it's such a small country. You can drive across it in an hour, and it's got some of the best roads I've experienced in Europe. And you can plunk yourself in the capital city. The capital city's got so much history in it. It's amazing. And then you drive out to Lake Bled. It's about half hour, 40 minutes away, and it's like 2 different worlds. But yeah, no, if that's one definitely to put on your list. And to be fair, anywhere in Slovenia, there's lots of mountains, lots of history. It's a great place to go and visit and photograph. So I think that's brought us to the end. Before we go around, everyone, I thought we'd mention something we've got coming up. We are looking to do, probably towards the end of March, we are looking to do a Q&A podcast where we will answer all of your questions. Hopefully there'll be a group of us on it. So we'll be looking to sort of receive questions from yourselves going forward. So keep an eye out on the Facebook for that. We'll put any announcement about it on there. That should be quite a good fun one. We've not done something like that before, so that'll be bit of an engineering challenge, but I'm sure we can make it work. But yeah, let's go around everyone and work out where we can find you. Mike, where can people find you if they want to see your work?
Mainly on Instagram, really. Just Mike Keatley Photography.
And Mark, how about you?
Mainly Instagram for me, which is Mark Lynham, MarkLynham.
Perfect. And Anthony?
Yeah, Instagram mainly. So it's Anthony_Fogarty_aviation. I have got a YouTube channel which has recently passed 1,000 subscribers, which I'm very happy about. So check that out. It's just Anthony Fogarty. Yeah, that's enough plugs from me, I think.
Wonderful stuff. And from my side, you can find me. My aviation stuff is at RS7 Aviation on Instagram, and I also have a non-aviation page, which is Rob Sluicer Photography. You can find a link through the aviation one, because I appreciate my surname is a strange one to spell. So we make it easy for yourself and go to the aviation one first. And obviously, as the aviation group, we have AvGeeksAssemble as an Instagram tag. We also have the Facebook, which again is AvGeeksAssemble. Please come on over. We've got a thriving community on the Facebook, which is constantly growing, and we're on there quite a lot. We have daily themes, weekly competitions, and obviously any announcement about live streams we're doing, or podcasts, Q&A, anything we're doing, events we're going to, it's all going to be on our Facebook. So head on over to Facebook, AvGeeksAssemble, and join up there. So all I've got to say is thank you very much, guys. Thanks for coming. I've really enjoyed this one. This has been a really good
yeah,
fun
it's been
podcast.
A great pod. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
So yeah, once again, thank you very much, and thank you for everyone else who's listening, who stuck around this long, and we will see you at the fence.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the AvGeeksAssemble podcast. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at AvGeeksAssemble.